Hi, it's Noorhasan. We're here at the Modern Parenthood podcast, and June is Pride Month, and I'm excited to have Haley and Abby today on my show. They're going to be sharing their stories of how they went about having both of their kids, and they traveled from out of town or out of state to come and see me. So, Haley and Abby, welcome to the show.
Hi. Hey, how are you?
So good to see y'all.
You too.
This podcast is meant to provide information on reproductive health. It does not establish a physician-patient relationship, and we would urge you to contact your treating provider regarding your care.
Well, first of all, our listeners just want to hear a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about both of yourselves, how you met, what your life was like as a member of the LGBTQIA population, and then how you went about in choosing your path to parenthood.
Okay, well, I'm Abby. I'm a NICU nurse here in Arkansas. Haley and I, we met through mutual friends in college. And then, we had the whole process of coming out to our families and figuring out life as a gay couple. And then we kind of just chose, that we decided that we wanted kids, and that's just kind of the route that we went. And we had to do a lot of research to figure out, how to do that, because we didn't really have a lot of friends that had done that yet. We were kind of the first in our friend group that got to experience it. So that was kind of neat and kind of hard in the same boat.
So we, being a gay couple in Arkansas, we both have had family that it's been rocky with, but we, got married and got through some of that. And then as we chose to start our family, that has really brought a lot of our family together. The whole process has been a really cool full circle moment to, bring kids into our lives and, also our family's life, that the support has been overwhelming and awesome. So, that's all we could ever hope for anybody in our situation. So it's been really exciting and a cool journey.
Well, you brought up something very important. You were probably the first amongst your friends to proceed with fertility treatments. And this is the reason I started this podcast. Is there are many people out there, they're afraid, they don't have resources, they don't know who to call, where to start. And you sharing your story will inspire someone or many people, many of our listeners, to pick up the phone and make a call because they've been thinking, waiting, wishing, wondering if they will have a child. And your story is so important. So thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story. So you came from Arkansas. Tell us about how you went about choosing a fertility doctor coming from Arkansas. You came to Texas for your fertility treatments. Tell us a little bit about that process.
So honestly, just on social media, we kind of follow a few people that, that we don't know, but that have been through the process and mentioned the clinic that we used. And to us, it was important that we go to a clinic where, we wouldn't have questions of, our relationship. Not that a medical professional should do that, but, we just live in an area where it's just not as common to seek treatments as a gay couple. So we saw a gay couple that had used the clinic we used, and so I just started researching, and on their website, they were very clearly an ally. And so that's why we decided to pursue an out-of-state clinic.
Oh, that's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about traveling from out of state. Like, how many hours was your drive? You did telehealth for some of your consults, but you had to come in for procedures. Tell us about juggling and how you scheduled your lives around traveling from out of state and doing sonograms and scheduling blood work.
Sadly, Haley had to take the most of that because my work schedule isn't as I can't miss.
Flexible.
Yeah, it's not as flexible. I can't miss as much work. And luckily, she's her own boss, so she can kind of miss work when she needs to. And so she had to take on a lot of it by herself, sadly.
It was a 4.5 hour drive one way. And so I learned very quickly after the first cycle that it would be quite a few drives in 1 month. And the first time around, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is a little bit miserable at times, to be honest, because I would drive there, get my, 5-minute sonogram, and then drive straight home. And so it was, 9 hours in the car for a very quick procedure. And the first time around, you just don't have perspective. You're like, oh, what am I doing this for? And then the second time around, it's so much better because you know what comes of it, and it's so worth it. But we chose the same clinic the second time around because we just had such a good experience with you, and the level of comfortability and just the level of care was perfect, and I have no complaints.
We were very thankful.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about how you go about choosing your donor sperm. What went into that thought process? How was it like? How did you go about ordering the sperm? Tell us a little bit about that.
That is a hard decision to make. What we did, we kind of just, you get to do all the genetic testing, so you know what you need to watch out for genetically. And so we kind of just went through it genetically of like what would work and what wouldn't work. And then once we narrowed that down, we kind of went off of, since we were using Haley's egg for both of our kids, we went off my qualities. So we chose a donor that had brown hair, green eyes, and things like that, so that our kids would kind of, look like both of us. And so that's kind of just what we did to narrow it down.
And we, you'd see some people say, and really based on social media, we use this bank or that bank, and we honestly just looked at them all and then made a big list, and just by process of elimination, just slowly started eliminating.
And tell us, you probably met with a therapist at some point because you're choosing donor sperm. How did that go? Was that beneficial for you in the process?
I would say it brings up some stuff that you may not think about. And that's obviously at one point in your children's lives, you're going to have to address the fact that, they learn about the birds and the bees, and they understand that you two did not conceive the child together. So just bringing up some good, valid, ways that you can address some of those things. That was certainly helpful.
And a big one that we didn't know about was the sibling donor registry. Like, because this donor could have multiple kids, and you want to try to avoid later in their life for them to link up with a sibling because they have no idea. And so we have our kids registered at that bank, that donor has all of these siblings. And so we did have to register them there just to make sure that doesn't happen. And we didn't even think about that before they brought it up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the donor, he donates at a bank, but then the sperm gets shipped all over the country. And that's, your kids could go to college in a different state and, potentially meet another person who was conceived from the same donor. Wonderful. So tell us about your first journey. Tell us about how you went about having your first child.
So we did IUI, and we it was pretty straightforward for us, thankfully. After we did our initial consults, I got genetic testing because I was going to be the one carrying, and we, like Abby said, we got the genetic results back, and then from there we were able to choose our donor. So that was probably the biggest part in the journey, and I know we kind of already touched on that, but it's almost just a lot of pressure because, in life you meet a mate and you don't think, hey, what's your genetic makeup? Are we going to make compatible children? It's not what you do. You don't choose a mate based on that. So it was a very kind of like
eye opener.
Yes, to have that much, say in the genetic makeup of your child almost. So once we got through that though, and then the financials, I guess, was the other stressful part of just like, hey, this is how much it's going to cost. This is, because not only do you have, of course, fees from the IUI procedure, but there's medication involved and all those sort of things that, getting the hang of that and swinging that. Once we got through all of that and then the actual process came, it was super exciting. And I will say we went through our first one during COVID a little bit, right post COVID. So it was a little bit lonely on my end sometimes, the procedure sides, because Abby couldn't come with me for a lot of them. So like the baseline procedures of like the saline sonogram and things just to look at your fertility levels that are, uncomfortable and a little bit intimidating, that you just have to kind of go through on your own as the person conceiving or the person carrying. That was kind of intimidating, I think, the first time around, because you just don't know what to expect. And I didn't have my partner there with me. But it was, I don't know. It was also exciting because we were, working on having a baby.
Yeah, for our listeners out there, so IUI, intrauterine insemination, that's where we get the sperm and put it directly into the uterus, and it's a simple speculum exam, sort of like a pap smear in the clinic. But so for y'all, you had to buy IUI prep sperm. Tell us a little bit about the choosing the sperm, and there are different preparations. There's the IUI prep sperm, there's an ICI prep sperm, which is intracervical insemination, there's ART, artificial reproductive technology prep sperm, there's IVF, in vitro fertilization prep sperm. It's exhaustive when you go to the donor sperm website, and there's
Yes.
all these different preparations, and then you got to look at your blood type, the donor's blood type, your genetic carrier screening, their genetic carrier screening. And that's just the basic medical stuff. Then there's the things that are important to you, like hair color, eye color,
Yeah.
physical features. Tell us some more about that, because our listeners really want to hear of how much work goes into that.
Yeah, that was very overwhelming seeing all that. And I think we ended up messaging you on there because we had no idea what we were supposed to purchase for what we wanted. We knew we wanted to do IUI if Haley was able. And so you kind of guided us through that on what to order. And
so the problem is, if you want to have more than one child, and in our case, we knew we did. Now, granted, we didn't know how many we wanted. But if you want your children to have all the same donor, which we had talked about and decided that that was something that was important to us, you then had to figure out how many vials to purchase, because every donor has a risk of running out of vials. So that was something too that we had to communicate with you about, as far as the likelihood of, how many times might it take for an IUI to work. And of course you can give us a statistic, but that's not always going to be black and white and the same for everybody. So having to decide how many vials to purchase was very stressful, because that's a huge chunk of money to put out at first, that you also may lose because you may have great luck like we did, and then you have vials that you don't need. And then we've also talked about maybe the second time around doing a different procedure and using Abby's egg. And so we really had a lot to figure out when it came to purchasing the sperm, which I think is why that was so stressful too, because it was a lot to navigate. So, once we kind of figured out how many times it might take, how important it was for us to have all of our children from the same donor, and then what procedures we were likely going to do, then we proceeded with, I think we ended up buying 6 vials.
Yeah.
6 vials of sperm.
You brought up a really important dilemma. How many vials of sperm to buy? And Are you spending too much money and will you have an excessive number of vials left? Or did you not buy enough and then all of a sudden you don't have another vial for your second or third sibling? And it's a big, big decision. And you brought up also another important aspect, which is utilizing Abby's eggs. So we call that reciprocal IVF, where we would take the eggs from one partner, fertilize with the sperm, and then create the embryos and transfer it to the other partner. And it's a huge decision because on one end you buy too many vials and you've spent money, but at least you have the vials to use for subsequent fertility journeys. But if you don't buy enough vials, then you may not have, your kids may not have the same genetic material, and it's such a big, big decision.
Yes.
So tell what were you, so once you had, going back to the sperm, once you had your kids, do you still have your vials? Were you able to sell them back to the sperm bank? What are you doing there in terms of the sperm?
We decided we were good with 2 kids this year, actually. So what was it, a couple months ago?
Yeah, it's probably around Christmas.
Yeah, a few months ago, we decided to just donate them back to that sperm bank so that families who are using that donor, because he was sold out, so families that are using that donor have another chance possibly.
Which I think the bank we used, you could sell them back for maybe half of what you paid for them within a year. But past that, you basically just have to donate them back. You could sell them to someone directly. There's a process to do that. And we looked at that. There was somebody that was interested, but it was kind of complicated. But once you donate them back to the bank, I believe they just put them back in their inventory and they resell them.
So they can purchase it from the bank easier.
Right. And they do contact current people who have children through that donor first. They kind of have first dibs because it's they don't just put it back out there for everybody, I don't think.
Oh, and that's a really great thing you did for other couples, because you're right, there may be others who were waiting for the same donor sperm. So that's a really good thing you did.
Yeah, and it kind of came down to like, and it is confusing. People also don't know, like, you have these and you're kind of sitting on them. You do have to pay storage fees every year. We had so with the advice from the clinic we used, we shipped 3 vials to the clinic when we started the process. And it only took us 2 vials. So we were paying a storage fee at our clinic for 1 vial of sperm. And then we were paying another storage fee at the bank for the rest of our vials that we had left. So, I mean, it's a hefty fee for a year at 2 different places. So that's also something to consider when you're, considering the amount of vials that you want to buy and be responsible for however long.
You also brought up a very good point that I would love for you to elaborate more with our listeners. You can purchase sperm from a bank, but not ship it. So it still stays physically at the bank, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, and a lot of our listeners don't know that that you could purchase it and still keep it at the bank until you're really ready for it, and that way you own it. And if it's time, then you can ship it when you're ready for it. So that's a very, very good point. Tell us about your first journey. Tell us about the IUI process. What was that like?
So, like I said before, we went through the first one really close to COVID. So the procedure itself, when you start your cycle, you call and you come in for blood work. Since I was out of state, I was able to do some of my blood work at the lab here and just have it sent. And then when I came in for my sonogram, I came in to kind of, I believe, see if things were active and working in there. I don't know exactly what you look for, but you come in for a sonogram and basically they're like, okay, we're good to go this cycle. So then after that, you just kind of wait until it's close to time when you're ovulating. And then you come in for another sonogram and they measure your follicles and just let you know that, okay, you're looking like you might be ready for a trigger shot on whatever day. So they give you a day where you're going to, well, actually, before that, I was on some oral medication to, I guess, help follicle size. And then you come in for sonogram, and then they let you know when you're ready for a trigger shot and then schedule your IUI procedure. And so coming in for the IUI procedure, the first one, I didn't know what to expect at all. I left there thinking like, I don't know if that worked, because I was tense. I was cramping really bad after. And honestly, though, I didn't think that until I went through my second procedure, and it was totally different. I was like, oh wow, like I was relaxed. I think what needed to happen happened. But I think I was just tense in the first time. So if I had any advice for anybody going through it, take some deep breaths, relax. It does not hurt. It's okay.
That was very well said. You remembered a lot of it. So yes, you do a suppression check or baseline ultrasound and blood work. And if that looks good, in your case, you took pills, and then you repeated the ultrasound. And once the follicle grew from a smaller size to a more mature size, that's when you did the trigger shot, which triggers or provokes the ovulation, makes the ovulation start. And then we time when you're ovulating with the insemination. So yeah, that was a great description for our listeners. But I love when the patients tell it from their end as to exactly what happened and what they felt in the process. And you're right. Each IUI can feel very different depending on what you have going on, where you are in your life, and sometimes that you've already had a child, and so you're like, okay, if this one works, we already have our first kid, and you tend to be a little bit more relaxed for the second and third ones. But yes, that was an excellent description of the process. And tell us about that first pregnancy. What was it like being pregnant? Tell us about the delivery. Tell us about what it felt like when you first held your baby. We want to hear all the details.
The pregnancy, I was pretty sick for the first 18-ish weeks. Just nauseous 24/7. But once I got through that, wonderful. I had no complaints about my first pregnancy, past, the extreme nausea at the beginning. And then delivery, I was induced with her. Our OB was actually going to be out of town. So I was induced a week early, and I was barely dilated to a 1. I was, but I wanted my OB to deliver. So I had a pretty long labor.
That's rough on you.
It was rough because I was very I was wanting to do it all natural and, all the things. And I labored for quite a while, and I had only progressed to like a 3. And I finally was like, all right, give me the epidural. And then I was pushing within an hour. And so had her, there's no better feeling than the first time you hold your baby and you meet them. And it was the most magical day of my whole entire life.
Especially when you've gone through all of these things and you don't know if you're ever going to like get to have that moment. So it was pretty surreal and special for us.
And what was it like taking her home and introducing her to the family?
Oh man.
Oh my gosh, amazing. On my side, she was the first grandkid. So, I mean, people were just absolutely over the moon, and she still is so spoiled and just awesome.
And on my side, she's like the baby cousin. So she was carried around and loved. She still is carried around, loved. It's pretty cool.
And what made you decide to have a second one? When do you make this decision? Tell us a little bit more about what goes into that thought process.
I've always wanted to. I have sisters, and I don't know. I just think it's every kid would love a sibling, someone to play with, and I don't know.
I was kind of the opposite. I was like, I have siblings, but I'm significantly older than my siblings. So I was kind of an only child dynamic for a long time. And I was like, I could see us having one child and just, going and doing a lot more because it's easier with one versus many. But to be honest, after having one, I was like, how could I not do this again? It was incredible. So,
And we were on the fence about how close to have them. We couldn't really figure out, did we want them super close or did we want to have a few years? So we kind of chose to do like 2.5 years. And at that point, we felt like we had given Stella her like one-on-one time and like let her feel special, and like she didn't have to share our time. And so we were like, okay, now I feel like she would understand more with a sibling at this point in her life, and also love it and not just be jealous of it all the time. So that was kind of something that we thought through as well on the timing.
And to me, I was, a little bit selfish in the aspect of I, obviously carried her, and then I breastfed her for 14 months. And I was like, I need a little bit of time with my body to just let it be my body for a little bit. And Abby was very gracious to, respect that and give me that. So, after that, I was like, okay, let's do this again. And it was just as awesome the second time around.
Yeah.
And did Stella ask you for a sibling or for a baby? Did she ever make any suggestions?
She did not. And even, when we were like, okay, we're having a baby, you're gonna get a sibling, and I think she was still kind of on the brink of her age, just like didn't really grasp that until she was here. And then she was like, oh my gosh, it's a baby, that's mine. And
then she was kind of bored by her for a little while, but
Yes.
now they play.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us, Haley, what was it like to be pregnant with your second and then you still have a young one at home? Tell us what that dynamic is like.
I would say it was crazy. I was like, I was complaining about being tired the first time around, and I was like, I have never in my life felt more tired than being pregnant and having a toddler. I remember I would come home and put Stella to bed around 7, and I would fall asleep every single night at 7 o'clock. And Abby would come home from work and come in and check on us, and I'd be out every night, which is not like me. I would nap when Stella napped out. It was crazy. Just because you're on all day, you're playing, you're just busy all day. And then, it was tough for sure.
And what was the delivery like with your second one?
Amazing.
Way
It was way better. It was smooth. I think we went in at, I don't know, 5 or 6 a.m. and she was here by 11:30.
We also learned a lot from that time. With the first one, you just want to be induced because you're excited and you don't know about dilation and all these things. So she went in wanting to be induced. She was dilated to a 1. And so it took forever. With our second one, we went in and they were like, you're at a 4. And so it was like, boom. Okay, let's induce me. And we had her in 4 hours from the time we got there.
Oh, that's so nice. What a nice labor and delivery process.
Yes.
So tell us, how did it feel when Stella saw the new baby and taking the baby home and adjusting with having new baby as well as a toddler at home?
The hospital was awesome. It was really sweet. So excited. I think she was confused that there was, because for so long we were like, you're getting a sister, you're getting a sister. And she would, go along with it, be excited. But then when there was a baby laying in the crib, she was like, oh man, like it's a real thing. Like I got a sister. So she was excited and she wanted to hold her and love on her. And it was really sweet in the hospital. I think the coming home process was a little harder on her than just the initial excitement of meeting her, because, Stella is very much, she sleeps in between us every night. Like she is attached to us. She wakes up wanting us to hold her all night long. And even still, but during that process, Haley was having to breastfeed Scotty and we were both kind of up and down all night long. So going from 1 to 2 to me was a lot harder than going from none to 1, honestly.
Yes, it was very bittersweet sometimes because, I'd be with the baby feeding her, but then Stella would be crying for me. And it was really tough on me for the first several months as Stella adjusted. I mean, I was just heartbroken sometimes, because I was just thinking, she's thinking I'm not there for her, all the things that a mom thinks, even though, logically we know they're fine and this is life and we're adjusting. But it still just breaks your mom heart to see them upset, and not that she was upset at Scotty or anything like that, but just, learning that there is
A new
routine and a new being in our life that our world also revolves around. So it was for sure an adjustment. I think I would say Scotty's 13 months old, and I would say we just now are like feeling like
They're buds.
and not even that, but just in the swing of like having to and sleeping, and it's a wild ride for sure.
Oh man, crazy.
So maybe a little bit of jealousy initially of the new baby, then maybe now she's more of a big sister.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Tell us, do you have any regrets about the process? Would you do anything different if you had to do it all over again?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, we were lucky. Our process was awesome. Everybody was great. It's been a great experience for us, the whole thing.
Yeah.
We got 2 awesome kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all worth it. You're exhausted, you're tired, but it's all worth it.
Absolutely.
What words of advice can you leave for our listeners, particularly because it's Pride Month? We definitely want to let others know in the LGBTQIA population that there is hope. There is the possibility of parenthood. What words of advice can you leave for our listeners?
I would say the process is super intimidating, but do the research and find a clinic and just reach out to them. Explain your situation and have a consult to hear about your options. I think when people hear fertility treatments, I think everybody's mind automatically goes to IVF, which is a much more intense and expensive process. And that may be the answer for some people, but in our case, was it an expensive process? Yes. But could it have been 3 times the amount? Also, yes. So I think that it's worth talking about your options, and starting earlier than you think you would need to, because to pay for the process and things you might need to save for a couple of years. And I think it's okay to hear out your options and then say, thank you for telling us our options. We'll reach back out to you when we're ready.
That is fantastic advice. I agree with you. At least making that first appointment, getting the testing, and at least finding out what your options are. There's no harm in learning and getting some knowledge about yourself and learning what your options are.
And then also the timing, people think, oh, I'm going to try to have a baby next month. Well, if you're going to go through this process, it is a process. And depending on what procedure you pick, you could be looking at several months of, tests and then other things. So knowing that it's not overnight, it does take quite a bit of time.
Yep.
You brought up a very important word, process. And that's a word I use probably about 6 times a day. It's a process. It's not an easy overnight, boom, you're pregnant. And I think for our listeners to understand that it is a process, and it doesn't happen immediately, is super important. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much both for being on the show and telling everyone about your experience and having your 2 beautiful girls, Stella and Scotty, and being an inspiration to others. We love to hear these success stories. If you want to hear more success stories and want to learn all things fertility, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Modern Parenthood podcast.
Pioneer.